I don't want to set the world on fire.
Darkness falls across the land.
Come along with me to a town beside the sea. We can wander through the forest and do so as we please. Come along with me to a cliff under a tree where a gaze upon the water as an everlasting dream. All of my affections, I give them all to you. Maybe by midsummer we won't have changed our tune. We'll still want to be in this town beside the sea. Make
I wish to share a thought with you. Fallout 3 was heavily flawed, not as a video game per se, but as a cathartic experience. To properly explain this statement, I will have to tell you about my own very personal psychological diving into this digesis. Starting from the premise itself, a bleak post-apocalyptic future ravaged by a nuclear holocaust and the fall of human values. The very first sequence of the game, which reminds me a lot of the beginning of Wall-E, does a great job in conveying the sense of hopelessness that such a wasteland should inspire, but it's immediately undermined by the forced presence of a voiceover narrating about everything in the most pretentious way possible. The "war never changes" bit still pisses me off to this day.
War never changes.
War never changes. Except when Solid Snake says otherwise. In that case, war has changed. The use of a vocal narration in a visual medium has always been something of a bother to the cathartic immersion into the story it wants to tell, and in most cases it tends to ruin said experience entirely. I believe that was the first step towards my increasingly uncaring, emotionally distanced relationship with this game, which already had failed to ignite my suspension of disbelief and interest in the context at hand. One can never underestimate the importance of a good presentation in such situations. Take the opening of Skyrim, for example, which is from the same company of Fallout 3, by the way. It doesn't need a disembodied voice to tell me what I need to know about the story and events ahead. The setting is directly shown to me through the eyes of my avatar. The basic exposition is delivered through the lines of dialogue some NPCs are exchanging near me. And then, suddenly, a dragon attacks and I'm propelled into action at breakneck speed. This approach works on various levels. I don't need to know everything about the world right away from the start. I'm merely introduced to it with a bang, and I'm bound to learn more about it as I travel it, uncovering its mysteries and fighting more monsters along the way. By successfully piquing my interest without banging the entirety of the setting on my head from the very beginning, I'm able to feel invested in the vast gaming universe at my own pace, allowing for a smooth transition in my avatar's shoes. Fallout 3 does the opposite. It explains everything right away, thus killing off the tension and activating my eye-rolling faculties. Little did I know at the time, that was just the beginning of the tragedy.
After that spectacularly faulty start, the game wanted me to care about my life in the vault, wanted me to care about friends and family members my character supposedly knew for her entire life. I was playing as a girl, by the way, but that I've never actually gotten to know and therefore never cared about. I was supposed to feel propelled into action as my character's father escaped to the outside world, and I was supposed to feel conflicted about leaving the only home I had. Because the game told me so. Needless to say, the only motivation that I wanted to even remotely consider after this underwhelming premise was my urge to get out there and start killing things in the most brutal way possible in order to fight the immense boredom this bloody prologue had instilled in me. I did not care about family or bonds. I killed my supposed best friends dead without a second thought. Conversing with other human beings was tedious and aggravating. I looked upon them all with disgust, and I had no problem whatsoever slaughtering someone just because their mere existence crossed me. With this mindset, I exited the vault and saw the world around me.
Time to see what wondrous sights await me beyond the confines of this cold and unfeeling hole in the ground. Oh, a cold and unfeeling wasteland. Great! Looks like Paradox was right after all. Card games really did destroy the world.
The dull, generic, boring, post-apocalyptic wasteland that laid before me only served to cement my alienation. After little more than half an hour of playthrough, I was done with this game. My immersion was already compromised by the horrible introduction, and my subsequent lack of interest in a world that didn't let me discover anything for myself for the entirety of Act 1 were too much for my catharsis to stand. I made the subconscious decision to play for the sake of killing, looting, and leveling up. I wouldn't have given thought to any of the stories and quests ahead of me. I was only going to go through them in order to gain money and experience points from them. And then things have gotten even worse. The second I was introduced to the so-called karma points, I realized this supposed free-roaming game not only didn't let me enjoy myself at my own accord, but it also dared to judge my every action, if I was being either good or bad. That's when I completely lost it. I started my own war against Fallout 3. I was going to turn my character into the greatest monster in the history of mankind just to spite the game's hypocritical moral uptightness. I raided houses and murdered families. I cannibalized them even. I shot people from behind. I blew up the ironically named city of Megaton, murdering thousands, in order to become a resident of Tenpenny Tower, only to help the Ghoul armies leap in from the basement and slaughter everyone inside. I even started enslaving people while I was at it. And the list goes on and on. The karma point system, as well as any system based on either good or bad decisions in order to progress in a story, is a load of bollocks. The very idea that the complexity of human nature could be oversimplified by such a black and white vision of the world is baffling in its own right, but the idea that an objective point of view wants to impose its prefabricated morality over my decision to survive in a post-apocalyptic wasteland the way I choose to, it's the final nail to the coffin of my patience. Fallout 3 is an outright liar. It promises an open world of choices and possibilities, but it ultimately dissipates the illusion by lecturing me about what's the right or wrong thing to do. Now, I like the overarching theme that in a world as bleak as this one, finding one's true virtue and becoming faithful to it might be the only element that separates humanity from its own annihilation, bringing a speck of hope for our future. But the execution of this concept in such an infuriatingly preachy way only fuels my need to be the perfect antithesis of the messiah this game wants me to be. And it's even more frustrating that, despite my being the worst human that ever lived and having said reputation spread all over the wasteland, when I do get to the main story, people still expect me to save the world just because I'm playing as the main character. So not only do I not have the freedom to pursue my own choices, but there's also no logical consequence to my many atrocious deeds. At this point, it feels as if the game itself is openly mocking me. No matter how much I fight it, I'm still supposed to be the savior. I'm still supposed to sacrifice my life at the end of it all for the sake of a bunch of NPCs I neither cared for nor I had the chance to do so. And when it's all said and done, the game finishes me off with a final insult. The return of the disembodied voice telling me the story of how bad I was despite my forced martyrdom. I really wanted to love this game. I was not diametrically opposite from the start to the overly abused premise of a post-nuclear world or the ideals the story seemed to care about. In fact, I've been reading a lot of Fallout Equestria as of late, and it's easily becoming my favorite literary saga of all time because it does all these things right, and also way more than just that. Again, it was all in the presentation and the approach that Fallout 3 shoved into my face that made me despise it, and also despise myself for how easily I was being manipulated by it. It didn't help the fact that the game wouldn't allow me to level up beyond number 20 for some reason. But even so, I believe the moment in which I realized what it was really doing to my psychology was when I found myself angry at the fact that my character was not allowed to kill children. That's when I became afraid. That's what this game did to me. It brought up the absolute worst, most hidden parts of myself, and it forced me to confront them. If anything else, Fallout 3 should be studied in psychology classes in order to discover how people react to prolonged exposure to passive-aggressive stimulations. My apathy never changes.